I was all the things that I tell people not to be now. Like I had a 3-inch 1911 that I carried cocked and locked inside the waistband, 45. Probably one of the worst defensive pistols you can choose. Because it's 2018 and not 1912, right? So.
Bringing you law, gospel, and guns. Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio.
Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 137, brought to you by Cook's Holsters, American-made custom Kydex holsters with a lifetime warranty and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Check them out at cooksholsters.com. Use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST and save 10% when you order. Well, today is a sad day at Armed Lutheran Radio. All good things must come to an end, they say. I am sad to report the departure of our good friend and regular contributor, Aaron Israel. Aaron let me know earlier this week, and he made his decision public in a Facebook post on Friday, saying he was hanging up his gun instructor hat. He just doesn't have the time as he advances his career to put in the work and attention required to be the kind of instructor he says he wants to be. I don't want to half-ass it, said Aaron, so it's time to walk away. If you've never met him, Aaron is not the kind of person to go through the motions. He commits to something, he makes it happen, and if he can't be the best at it, he doesn't really have any interest in half measures. He'd expressed his disillusionment with his work as an instructor for some time and was actively looking for ways to change the public's perception of the need for competent training. It's why he opposes the license to carry classes that states like Texas require for the permit to carry a concealed firearm. It's why he gave up teaching those classes. He just didn't believe in them, so he walked away from them. To be honest, I figured it was only a matter of time before he focused his intellect and his time and his passion in a different direction. Aaron has been with us since episode 8, and over the course of 3 years has provided us with timely and timeless information. Sergeant Bill and I took his combat-focused shooting class. It was a one-day class back in 2016. It was my first full-day training class, and it was a real eye-opener. Aaron is definitely a gifted instructor. He easily makes complex concepts understandable. And when it came time for my wife to get her license to carry and to take the class, I turned to Aaron to do that. That's how much I trusted his ability to convey the information to a newcomer. Over the course of the next 2 years, I learned a ton from Aaron through his weekly tips, his articles, his posts in social media, and my opportunities to hang out with him on the show, on the range, and on a road trip to Louisiana for the Louisiana State IDPA match back in 2017. I will forever be grateful to him for the content that he provided for listeners on this show. I'm honored to consider him a friend, and I know that whatever he puts his heart and his mind to, it's going to be a success. After this brief timeout, we're going to come back with more about our friend Aaron Israel, and later you'll get to hear his final segment on Armed Lutheran Radio. I want to take a minute here to thank our partner, the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. If you're involved in a situation where you have to use your firearm in self-defense, you very well may find yourself in a legal battle against overzealous prosecutors or the families of the criminal who you shot, or threatened, who are looking to deprive you of your freedom or your hard-earned savings. You may find yourself charged with a crime or facing a civil lawsuit even if you did nothing wrong. That's where Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network comes in. For a small yearly fee, they will provide you with money for attorneys, money for bail, consultations, and access to experts like Marty Hayes and Massad Ayub. Don't face the fight alone. Visit Armed Citizens Network today. Use the promo code ARMEDLutheran-25. Save $25 off your first year's membership, or you can grab the coupon on my website, armedlutheran.us. Sign up today. They will send you lots of cool resources, 8 instructional DVDs, and a book by Massad Ayub that I cannot recommend highly enough. Don't wait until you need their help. Be prepared. Sign up today. Visit armedcitizensnetwork.org. Welcome back to Armed Lutheran Radio. We're continuing with our Aaron Israel retrospective with an introduction to the man. This is a segment from the Reformation Gun Club hangout that I did with Aaron earlier this year. I'm not going to ask you how you got started. Well, yeah, let's say, what made you decide you wanted to start teaching people about guns and self-defense?
Well, it really started out when I was in the military, probably circa 2008, 2009, when I was getting back from Iraq. And my last job before I got out of the military was to be the rear detachment commander, which is where you have all the soldiers who can't deploy forward to combat because they've got medical issues or possibly disciplinary issues and things like that. And then you're also providing information from the forward unit back to the spouses of the people who are deployed. And I had a really good family readiness group with all the ladies in our battalion, and a lot of them were interested in getting licensed to carry. We were at Fort Hood, and I thought, well, there's a whole group of people here that are coming to me asking where should I go get my license. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to get certified to teach that class, and then we can take care of it all in-house. And I wasn't going to charge them anything. I just wanted to do it kind of as a deal for the unit. So I went to the class and got certified to do the license to carry. And that's kind of where I started, was with that. And then at the same time, as part of my military career, I was also always real involved in developing curriculum and things like that for soldiers who were getting ready to deploy. I was in charge of the marksmanship program for the brigade. And so I spent a lot of time on the range teaching military doctrine about, pistols and rifles. So after I did license to carry for a little while, I wanted to give my students the option to do something more beyond just getting their license, because I thought that was important. And there weren't a lot of places that were offering training except for the big schools like Thunder Ranch and places like that in Central Texas. So right. I wanted something that they could come to that was a little more affordable and more local. Mm-hmm. And so initially I did all the NRA classes, basic pistol, RSO, and some of that stuff. And, I kind of found that it was a great, intro to firearms as far as how they function, and this is how to shoot them and things like that. But it wasn't really things that would help you if you needed to defend yourself that right. night when you got home from class, right? Right. So I took several classes myself that some friends recommended to me, and one of them was Rob Pincus's class, and I took that, and it really resonated with me because it was simple. And it didn't require you to be a high level, like competitive level shooter like some of us are. Right. But it was something that could appeal to people who maybe only take one class, but are interested in self-defense, but aren't going to shoot 1,000 rounds a month, but still need to have those fundamental basic skills to be able to defend themselves. And so I decided to get certified for that, and that's kind of how that happened. So
cool. Now you've recently decided to stop teaching the Texas Concealed Handgun course. Why?
A couple of reasons. First off, now that I'm in Dallas-Fort Worth area, when I was in Midland, there were only probably 3 or 4 people teaching the license to carry class out there. Mm-hmm. And so there was a bigger market for it. For me to, I could get 20 of the students, and, we kind of split them up, and we all kind of worked together and pushed students to each other's classes if we weren't teaching that weekend. Right. So there was that, small town type thing going on out there, and a really good community of shooters. In DFW, there's, 25 indoor ranges, and they all have their own in-house CHL instructor. And, mm-hmm. you look in the zip codes, and there's, 50 of them, within driving distance. Right. So
Right.
it's hard to compete with those big ranges, and I don't know any of these instructors, and so there's not that teamwork that was happening in Midland, and so there's just really not a market for it for me to take advantage of in Dallas-Fort Worth. It's kind of saturated. So
right.
That's the first reason. The second reason is kind of a principled stance. Like, I don't think that the licensing class is any good. I mean, if you teach it the way the state of Texas wants you to teach it, you essentially read off a PowerPoint for 4 hours, and then you go shoot 50 rounds at the range without any focus on the fundamentals while you're at the range, and without really a good understanding of how case law works and what actually happens in courtrooms as it relates to the legal portion. So you end up getting a shotgun blast of information that's not very good information, that's not necessarily understood very well by the person presenting it. And so I tried to make my class different, but since that's what people expect and that's what they want, they're not willing to spend that extra time on the range, and they're not willing to have that extra discussion about the law. And so if I did it the way that I'm supposed to do it, it wasn't really worthwhile. So
right.
I'm for constitutional carry and principle, because I think you ought to be able to exercise your rights just by way of being a law-abiding citizen. And
right.
with that being my principle, I felt like I was contributing to the problem by continuing to teach the class and make money off of it and all that. So
right.
That's kind of the twofold reason why I don't do it anymore.
Got it. So, all right, before we get into sort of philosophy and approach, let's talk about a little bit about how people should choose an instructor. There are lots of people in the business, as you said, and most of them are touting their experience in law enforcement or the military, or they were in the teams or whatever. It seems like there are three types of instructors out there. There's the ex-cop, the former military guy, and guys like Grant Cunningham who are neither. And then I think in that last group includes people like yourself who, although you have that military service experience, you're not pushing that as proof of your expertise. Is that kind of a fair assessment of where all the instructors come from?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of experience and certificates as marketing. I mean, that's I think if you're a good teacher and you've taught a lot of students and you've got a lot of experience presenting information and helping people get better, that the word's going to get out just naturally through those channels. I think a good place to start is whatever certifications that they're touting, just look up the background behind those. There's lots of good ones out there, and then there's lots of not so good ones out there. Unfortunately, some of the ones that people perceive as good, like for instance, if I've got, NRA personal protection outside the home or NRA basic pistol, because it's got that National Rifle Association tag on it, people might assume that that's the curriculum that they want to take. But in reality, a lot of those guys, you essentially pay for certification and everybody passes. And so it's not necessarily the best thing. So you want to ask the questions of people who have taken the class, find people who've trained with that instructor before, and then see what kind of content they're putting out, right? Nowadays, most instructors who are worth anything are going to have something on the internet. Like, you can find my content on Personal Defense Network. I've written a whole bunch of blog posts, and you can kind of see what my training philosophy is and what I care about. And so you got to look at, okay, what are my goals? And if your goals are to go to Navy SEAL fantasy camp, then there's instructors out there who will do that. And, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. That's your money. Spend it how you want to. But then if you're looking for personal defense that's related to your lifestyle, look for instructors who are writing things that resonate with you as somebody who's not an operator or a police officer or security personnel, and go find those classes. And there's lots of good ones out there, but don't get hung up on, combat experience and things like that, because my combat experience would be useful if I was teaching people in that context, but I'm not teaching people how to go to Iraq and shoot artillery, right?
Right.
So, my combat experience is pretty irrelevant to personal defense. The only thing I tell people, the only thing I learned in the military that's useful for me being an instructor now is just how to communicate and stand in front of people and teach a class. Like, that's the best thing I got from the Army that helps me in my shooting classes. And all the tactical stuff, though, is totally, that context is something I haven't been in for a decade now, so it's not useful. So,
right. Talk about in the time that you've been teaching, name one thing or two things that you've changed your mind about as an instructor over the years. Is there something that you Is there something that you teach now that you didn't teach before because you've changed your mind about something, or vice versa? Is there something that you no longer teach that you used to think was important?
Oh man, I tell you what, when I started out teaching, when I was initially teaching license to carry, I was a walking Texas stereotype of a gun owner. So, I mean, I was all the things that I tell people not to be now. Like I had a 3-inch 1911 that I carried, cocked and locked inside the waistband, 45, probably one of the worst defensive pistols you can choose, because it's 2018 and not 1912, right? So it's, but I was that guy. I carried that, and then I focused all my time and energy on, standing in front of static targets and shooting at them. So there was that whole evolution. But since I've been teaching what I've been teaching, some of the things that I've kind of changed my mind about, like I used to really super emphasize the way that I like to teach reloads, right? Mm-hmm. So, I teach people to stay focused on the target, bring the gun back into the ready position, and reload while looking at the target and using the overhand rack method to get the slide forward. And I used to really harp on that. And if I had somebody who had a competition background and used the slide catch and kind of did it up in their workspace, quote unquote, looking at the gun and all that, I used to get after them real hard, right? Mm-hmm. Knowing what we know, I was like, well, that doesn't really make sense when I just talked about the plausibility principle, and we know that reloads are probably not likely to happen. So why am I spending so much time correcting this guy's reload when he's getting the gun reloaded just to, maybe save him a couple of seconds? Because it's probably still going to work fine, and it's not worth me, taking all this time out of class to really emphasize something that I just said is not an essential skill, right? So now I'm going to show people how to reload, and I'm going to suggest that they do it the way that I do it. But if they're getting the gun reloaded and it's working, I don't spend as much time on that. So that's one thing, is I just don't think it really is as important as I was making it before, just to be dogmatic,
And we'll be back with more right after this. Hey, if you're like me, you like shopping at gun shows. No pressure from sales staff, no need to bother them to ask to look at stuff. You just pick stuff up and dry fire it and look at it and hold it. Imagine if you could get that experience at your local gun store, where you don't need to bother anybody. You don't have to ask people for help if you don't need it. You don't have salespeople hovering over your shoulders. Well, this is what it's like when you shop at G4G Guns. Cassie and Patrick Coburn are the owners, and you've heard them on the program before. They are absolutely awesome people, and they'll help you find exactly the right gear for you. But there's no sales pressure. You just browse the store, you pick up and hold anything that you want to look at without asking permission, just like at the gun show. And once you've found the gun you want, or if you actually do need assistance, Patrick and Cassie are there to help. It's the best of both worlds, gun shop and gun show, in one place. It really is the best. G4G Guns. They're located at 2035 Central Circle, Suite 108 in McKinney, Texas. They're open Mondays from 1 to 6, Tuesday through Thursday 11 to 7, and on the weekends you'll find them at a gun show near you. Or check them out online at G4G Guns. That's G, the number 4, G, guns.com. G4G Guns, the gallery for great guns. G4GGuns.com. Welcome back to Armed Lutheran Radio. We're continuing with our look back at Aaron Israel's contributions to the show over the past 120 some odd episodes. In addition to the tips that he regularly provided to us, one thing Aaron would occasionally do was to provide the kind of advice that you wouldn't normally associate with self-defense, but which made you think about your overall personal security. Not just the physical stuff or the gun stuff, but the financial aspect of defending your family. Aaron is a big proponent of financial freedom, Dave Ramsey's philosophy of home and personal finance. And here is one example from episode 56.
This week I want to take off the gun instructor hat for just a brief moment and talk to you about something that you probably don't think enough about, but that really has to do with your personal defense, and that's defending your finances. Now, while it's possible that you could be put in a situation where you have to use physical force to defend yourself from another human being, something that's way more likely to happen to you and probably already has if you've been in the economy long enough, is you end up losing a job, the economy goes down, and you get your pay slashed, or bad things happen in the area of finances, and a lot of people in America just aren't prepared for it. We've just come through a pretty tumultuous time period in our history when it relates to the economy. We've gone through a recession that's been the worst since the Great Depression, and we're starting to recover from it now with the new president and all of those good things, and people are excited about good times being back and the economy starting to rebound. But you need to be prepared for the fact that the economy is cyclical and eventually it'll go down again. You could lose your job tomorrow, and there's all kinds of personal finance things that could happen. Your water heater could explode, you could blow a tire, you could run into a deer like I did last weekend, and you have to be able to prepare to pay for those things. Otherwise, you can end up in a bad situation. Financial woes cause a lot of marriages to break up. They cause a lot of turmoil in people's families, and sometimes they even cause people to contemplate suicide and things like that because they don't have their finances straight. So I want to talk to you about some basic principles that you can adopt that'll help you defend your finances from the things that happen in the economy and that happen on a day-to-day basis. The first principle that you need to develop is to implement a written budget and stick to it. A budget is simply a document used to plan how to spend every dollar of income that you bring in. You put your monthly income at the top, you subtract out your essentials such as your monthly rent, your mortgage payment, your heat, your electricity, your water, internet, cell phone, groceries, and then what you have left after you pay those essentials is what you refer to as your disposable income. That surplus cash you can dedicate to having some fun, you can use it to retire debt if you need to, you can put it into savings, or you can invest it. When you go through the physical exercise of actually making a budget, you're likely to find areas where you're probably spending more than you should be, and you can start to cut back those areas and become more efficient in the way you use the money that you bring in. The second principle is not to buy things that you cannot afford. And yes, that would include guns and ammo. Sorry to break it to you. If you can't afford a gun and pay cash for it, then you shouldn't be buying it. That means if you can't fit something in your budget, you don't buy it. And some people take afford to mean I can get a loan for it or I can put it on my credit card. But what I mean by afford is you can pay cash for it. If you can't pay cash for something, which means that you can support it with the income that you're bringing in, then you really can't afford to own it. And your lifestyle doesn't match your wage. I'm a big fan of Dave Ramsey. A lot of these principles that I'm talking about come from being a part of his Financial Peace program. If you haven't been to Financial Peace University, you need to check that out. But he says act your wage, and I think act your wage is the best way that I can put that. If you don't make enough money to have certain things and pay cash for them, then you need to either start making more money, spend your money more efficiently, or really, develop your lifestyle and trim down in such a way that you're living within your means. The third principle is to set up a rainy day or emergency fund. It amazes me. There was a study done not too long ago that something like 80% of Americans don't even have $1,000 in their bank account to be able to cover basic expenses that might happen, whether it's a blown tire, hitting a deer. I had to pay $750 deductible on my insurance because I hit that deer. If I didn't have money in the bank, I wouldn't be able to afford that. So having an emergency fund, you can start out with something simple like $500 if you're strapped for cash right now. And eventually, as you start to get better at budgeting and putting money away and learning how to cut back on things that you don't need, you can build that emergency fund up. I like to have about 20% or so of my income in that emergency fund so that if I have a big crisis like losing my job or something like that, I'm not going to have to worry about keeping the lights on and keeping the bills paid until I find something else. And working in the oil and gas industry, that's something that I want to be prepared for because it's very boom and bust. And a lot of the industries that we're in can be just like that, whether it's real estate or what have you. The economy is cyclical. The fourth principle is to kill whatever debt you already have and then avoid it like the plague. When financial hard times come about, which they're going to, you can't avoid them. It's part of life. You don't want to have creditors coming to take your stuff, repossess your truck, put your house in foreclosure. If you want to defend your personal finances, you need to develop an allergy to monthly payments. Like I said, I work in the oil and gas industry, and it's very volatile. When times are good, people rake in the cash, and when times are bad, the smart ones still have it, and everybody else goes out and buys a truck that they can't afford and new rims and those kind of things and financing it, and then they end up having to lose those things when the oil patch goes down because they spent and lived above their means during the good times. So when you're making money, you ought to be avoiding debt like the plague, and when you get a little bit extra, throw it at the debt that you already have. A lot of us made financial mistakes when we were younger, from taking out too many student loans to buying cars we couldn't afford, things like that. you can retire that debt if you just get after it. Think about loading that extra money that you have at the end of the month into your AR to kill debt. Load that AR up and shoot it at the threat that is the debt monster until the debt monster is gone. And once you finally get that debt killed, then you can have freedom and you can have more money to spend on things you want to do, like taking classes, going to IDPA matches, buying new guns, buying all the kinds of things that go with being a gun enthusiast or whatever your other hobbies are. So think of your finances as a weapon, and you'll realize how important it is to control that weapon. And living off of debt is kind of like outsourcing your personal defense to someone else when it's really your responsibility. You don't want to be living with other people's money, because when times get hard, they're going to come calling, and you don't want that to happen. The fifth principle, once you've killed your debt, you've got an emergency fund, you've got all those things set up, would be to start investing in your financial future. That may mean saving up for your kids' college, saving up for your retirement, investing. Maybe you always wanted to own a lake house, putting some money away for something like that. Once you kill your debt and you have your finances under control and you've got a good budgeting process, you're going to have more extra money to put away to do those things that you'd like to do before you die, whether it's take a trip or what have you. So always do that. Always have a plan for what you're going to do when you get old, or, hey, I want to travel and I want to do things like that. Put money away for that, make a plan for it, and you can do it when you don't have that debt hanging over your head and you're telling all your money where to go every month with a good budget. The last principle I want to give you is you need to have a plan for what if you don't wake up tomorrow. So if you don't have a last will and testament, it's very easy. You can do those for free online now through places like LegalZoom, or you can go get with a lawyer and do it the traditional way. Get yourself a last will and testament so that if you were to die tomorrow with some tragedy, whether it be gun-related or you get in a car accident or you just have a health issue and you end up dying, that the people that you leave behind don't have to wonder what to do with your assets. It saves them a lot of trouble. And also think about getting some life insurance. If you don't have life insurance, then what would your kids and your wife or whoever it is that depends on you do if you weren't here tomorrow? So think about those things. Think about setting up a will, setting up a life insurance policy, and getting those things squared away. Financial stress can crush your dreams. It can destroy your marriage. It can break up your family. So defending your personal finances is just as important as defending your physical body as you walk around with a gun in the public space. So you can have a gun and be prepared for a scenario that's way less likely to happen, but if you have your finances in trouble, you're going to be avoiding a lot of things that happen to people pretty commonly. So the bonus, you'll be able to afford more guns, ammo, and training when you have more money in the bank. But in all seriousness, try to get on a budget, stop buying things you can't afford, kill whatever debt you have, put money away for emergencies, and start preparing for more fun things to do in the future, like have enough money in the bank that you don't have to work the rest of your life. I can promise you that in taking these principles to heart, you'll reduce your stress significantly and you'll be far more likely to live a long, happy life.
Let me take a moment to tell you about our membership site, the Reformation Gun Club. Members get exclusive content, all the segments, full-length interviews, full-length episodes of Clinging to God and Guns with extra content not released previously. They're kind of like the movies with the extended cuts or the director's cuts. Oftentimes what we have to do is trim those segments down so we can fit them into a reasonable time in the show, and that means extra content for you as a member of the Reformation Gun Club. You get access to our closed Facebook group, discounts from our partners like Gunbox gun safes, easy-to-see targets, Daltech Force, Cook's holsters, Talon gun grips, inline fabrication, much more. So go check it out on Patreon. We've moved to Patreon. Registration is much easier. You get your own unique RSS feed, which means you can paste that into your favorite podcast app and take it with you and listen anywhere. For as little as $2 a month, you can take advantage of all of those benefits and help support the show. Visit patreon.com/armedlutheran or go to gunclub.armedlutheran.us and sign up today. Welcome back to Armed Lutheran Radio. Aaron Israel was never one to shy away from controversy, and he was happy to call out the bad ideas on the pro-gun side of the aisle as he was on the left. One of those topics that seemed to bring out the worst in people was the idea of defending property with lethal force. Way back in his first episode, episode 8, Aaron addressed this subject, but then he wrote an article about it last year and then addressed this issue again in episode 102, laying out a clear and unambiguous argument on the subject.
This week I want to relate to you a tragic story that happened over the Christmas holiday, and I want to give you a rule of thumb that'll help you from making a similar tragic mistake as the guy in the story. So this story comes out of Coleman, Alabama. Family and friends of 22-year-old Logan Trammell are gathering to remember the young musician after an accidental shooting took his life on Christmas Eve. Trammell's family says he was driving away from his parents' home around 11:30 on Sunday in one of his father's vehicles when it happened. His father was unaware that his son was trying to borrow his truck. Fearing the vehicle was being stolen, the family says he yelled out and fired a warning shot in the air in an attempt to get the driver's attention. They say he then shot once at the tailgate to try to stop whoever was taking the truck. Once the truck stopped, they say his father realized he had accidentally shot and killed his own son. And I'm going to stop reading the story there. So let's dissect a little bit of what happened in this situation. So when you realize, if this was you, that you are having a piece of property in your vehicle stolen out of your driveway, you're really not in any reasonable fear for your life at that point. If I look out the window from my studio right now and I see somebody trying to steal my truck, I am not in any physical danger inside the house right now. So the smart thing to do, and what this guy should have done, is to call the police and say, hey, somebody is stealing my vehicle. It looks like this is the license plate, this is my address where it's leaving from. Can you please stop the guy who's trying to steal my vehicle, right? And hopefully they pull the guy over and they're able to get your car. But even if they don't, the worst thing you've got to deal with is making an insurance claim for stolen property, which you're going to at least get something for. And if you tell me you don't have insurance, well, you need to have insurance. Get insurance on your vehicles, and you'll be able to cover a situation like this, at least to a certain extent. I'd rather be dealing with the hassle of insurance and be alive than have the potential of what this guy did on accident. So a lot of people say, hey, the mistake was made when this guy didn't properly identify his threat, and I think that is incorrect. The mistake was made when he went out to use deadly force to protect his property because he didn't need to, because his life was not in danger. So even if he had identified the threat and it was a bad guy and he could clearly identify the bad guy, he didn't need to go out there, because guess what the bad guy, if he's a violent criminal, could have done? Well, he could have turned around and shot him. He could have run him over. He could have fired at the house, and a bullet could have gone in and struck somebody that it didn't need to strike in the house, right? So all kinds of bad outcomes besides just shooting the wrong guy could have happened in this situation, because he's instigating a confrontation that he doesn't need to instigate over a mere piece of property. Now, me being a Christian, and a lot of us who listen to Armed Lutheran Radio, I hope are Christians as well, I value human life over every material possession that I have, and I'm talking about all human life. There is nothing that I own in my house or in my shed or in my driveway that is worth taking a human life to protect. The reason I own firearms is not to protect any of my stuff or even my home. My firearm is to protect the people who live inside my home, starting with me and extending out to my wife and daughter. So if I'm not in danger and my wife and daughter are not in danger, I'm not going to put myself or them in danger in order to protect a piece of property. A lot of people will ask me the question. They'll go ahead and say, yeah, I understand if that's my truck, but what if the guy comes into my house? That changes things for me. Well, not necessarily. It shouldn't be a foregone conclusion that you're going to have a deadly force confrontation even if there's an intruder in your home. I've talked before about evade, barricade, respond on this podcast. So your first priority in a home defense situation ought to be to get away from the bad guy, to evade if you can. Then you arm yourself as quickly as you can, and if you can barricade yourself in a room, like I plan to barricade in my daughter's room, I've got a deadbolt on the door, and I've got a backup gun and a medical kit and a cell phone staged in there, and that's where I plan to barricade. And if I can get to that barricade spot and put a locked door between me and the bad guy, then hopefully it's going to give me enough time to call the police and let them come and have a confrontation with the bad guy. Because even inside my home, if I can avoid the fight altogether, then that's what I'm going to do. Now, there are certain situations where you can't avoid the fight. Either you can't get to a barricade position, you can't evade and get out of the house. Maybe you're in a situation where by the time you realize that your house is being invaded, you're already in fear for your life and the guy is right there in the room with you. And if that's the case, or maybe they break through your barricade, then you do what you got to do. You use deadly force and you protect your life. But at that point, you're not protecting your home. You're not protecting your property. You're protecting your life because you have a reasonable fear that your life is in danger. That is not the case just because someone is in your house, and it's especially not the case if someone is breaking into your shed or trying to take your vehicle or steal something out of your vehicle, or whatever the case is where you are not physically there and you're not in any danger in that moment and you have no reasonable fear for your life. So to summarize, The rule of thumb is don't use deadly force to protect property. That is a bad idea. If you do it, all kinds of bad outcomes can happen. Now, let's say that you don't take my advice and you do get into a confrontation with someone over property. Even if you win that confrontation, which, as I said, is not guaranteed, you might end up bleeding out next to the property you were trying to protect. Even if you do survive and you put the bad guy down, your state law might allow for that. It might be justified legally speaking, but you may still have to go to court and prove it, right? The judge and the jury might not see it the same way that you do. The black letter law might mean one thing to you, and it might get applied in a different way. If you read case law, that happens a lot of times, and even if you go to court and you prevail, you're talking about thousands of dollars in legal bills. You're talking about a long, drawn-out process that could take years. It's going to damage your reputation. It's going to make you have to take off a whole bunch of days at work and all that sort of stuff when you could have just made a stolen property claim on your insurance and hopefully gotten some money back, right? And I'd rather be alive, like I said, and dealing with insurance than dead or potentially having a big court battle to clear my name. So there just isn't any good justification for getting involved and potentially escalating to deadly force when property is all that is at stake. The only time deadly force should be a thing that should be a real option for you is when it's immediately necessary in that moment to protect yourself from death or serious bodily injury. And if you have no reasonable perception that you are in danger of death or serious bodily injury, then you don't need to instigate a confrontation, right? And so if you follow that rule of thumb, then you're going to avoid a whole lot of situations. Now, as with all rules of thumb, there are no absolutes. I'm sure you can think right now in your head of some kind of crazy hypothetical situation where the property that you're trying to protect is so valuable and essential to your life that maybe it's worth potentially dying for. I can't think of anything that I own that rises to that level. But if you can, I'll go ahead and grant that maybe there's some exceptions to that, but I doubt you'd be able to convince me even with the hypothetical that you've made up. But if you follow that rule of thumb of don't use deadly force to protect property, then you're going to avoid not only potentially shooting someone who doesn't need to be shot, which could be your kid breaking back into the house after they snuck out. It could be the situation like this guy where the kid was trying to borrow your truck and didn't tell you about it. Or even could be your drunk neighbor who's trying to go into the wrong house because he forgot which house he lives in. There's all kinds of stories just like that about people shooting the wrong guy inside their house because he went to the wrong door. So just don't do it, and that's going to be the best rule of thumb for you. Use of deadly force, your firearm, is to protect the life of your family and your own life and not any of the things that you own. And if you follow that rule, you're going to make a lot of good decisions.
And we'll be back with Aaron's final farewell segment right after this. All right, I want to take a minute here to thank our incredible sponsor, Cook's Holsters. They have been with us from day one when this show was just an idea, really, before we even started the podcast. And I was so impressed with Bob Cook and his products that I signed up to become a dealer. I believe in the product so much, I wanted to sell it myself. Cook's Holsters makes custom Kydex holsters for range work, for concealed carry, for competition, inside the waistband, outside the waistband, in a variety of colors and prints and mounting options. Check out the new series of patriotic printed Kydex holsters as well. Those are really cool. And you may be asking yourself, every time you hear me talk about Cook's Holsters, well, what's the big deal? Why should I trust Cook's Holsters when there are so many other Kydex holster makers out there? Listen, Cook's makes the molds and sells printed Kydex that many of the other holster manufacturers actually use to build their holsters. This is a great company. This is a great product. They come with a lifetime warranty against defects, 100% satisfaction guarantee, or your money back. Check them out today at cooksholsters.com. Be sure to use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST, that's all one word, and save 10% off your order. Go to cooksholsters.com today.
Hey folks, this is Aaron Israel with Fundamental Defense, and this week I'm here to say farewell to Armed Lutheran Radio. I want to thank all of the listeners out there who have been faithful and listened to my tips and given me feedback over the past couple of years. And I really appreciate all of you guys, and I hope that I've been able to give you some good advice to help you be more prepared for personal defense and to make better decisions as an armed citizen. Moving on from teaching gun classes, I've got a day job that keeps me pretty busy, and I've gotten a couple of promotions in the past year or so that have made it to where I just don't have the time to devote to being as good of an instructor as I ought to be. So with that being said, I don't want to do something halfway. If I'm going to do it, I want to do it right. So I feel like it's time I need to step away from teaching gun classes and focus on my career. And I can't really justify giving you guys personal defense tips if I'm not immersed in the personal defense world and continuing to teach classes. So I'm going to step aside and let somebody else hopefully fill this void. I'm sure Lloyd will find somebody who will give you just as good advice as I give, and hopefully better. If any of you guys out there, though, or ladies, are interested in personal finance, I am starting up another little side gig called Abnormal Financial Coaching. I always have believed that finances are a part of preparedness and really a part of personal defense. If you're not prepared for what could happen if you lose your job tomorrow as far as your bank account is concerned, then you're not really prepared for what's most likely to happen to you in life. And so that's where I'm going to try to help people to get out of debt and have a budget and stick to that budget and learn how to manage their money properly and build wealth as they go throughout their career. So if that's you and you would like to sit down and look at the numbers that you're dealing with in your personal financial situation, check out my Facebook page, Abnormal Financial Coaching, or give me a call at 432-556-3151, and I'd be glad to help you out. But once again, I really appreciate all of you Armed Lutheran listeners out there. I'll still be a big fan. I'll be checking in every week to listen to the podcast, and I know that they're going to continue to do an awesome job. So thank you for the opportunity to have given you some good advice over the past couple of years, and I hope you've learned something from it. And you guys stay vigilant and stay safe and make good decisions. And that'll be all from me. I really appreciate you guys. Thanks.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for this week. That's all that we've got time for. I want to thank Aaron Israel for his long service to this program, for his dedication, for his hard work, and all the great content that he's provided to listeners of this program over the 120-plus episodes that he was involved with Armed Lutheran Radio. Aaron, thank you again for everything that you've done, and good luck in whatever comes next. And thank you, dear listeners, for your support. And be sure to tune in again next week for another episode of Armed Lutheran Radio.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, and TuneIn. This podcast is made possible by Cook's Holsters and contributions from listeners like you.